family came to Disneyland for magic, but got chaos, confusion, and one very angry grandpa. With stolen churros, spinning disasters, and absolutely no one staying calm, it somehow became the best trip ever.
We packed our bags for Disney dreams with Mickey ears and sunscreen. But Dad forgot the tickets twice, and Mom packed winter coats, how nice. It's July in Annalyngrad, oh Disneyland, Disneyland. Nothing goes the way we planned. Lost our map, missed our ride. Grandpa's napping by the slide. Disneyland, Disneyland, memories that beat the band. Little Timmy threw up on Dumbo. Sister cried through It's a Small World. Dad got lost looking for bathrooms. Mom's taking pics like she's a photo girl. Say cheese with Mickey's behind. Oh Disneyland, Disneyland, nothing goes the way we planned. Lost our map, missed our ride. Grandpa snoring by the slide. Disneyland, Disneyland, chaos never felt so grand. We paid $8 for a pretzel, $15 for a Coke. Dad tried fitting in kids' seats. Space Mountain made him croak. I'm too old for this. The parade got rained on, we're soaking wet, but we're laughing at this family mess. Even though nothing went quite right, we'll remember this forever, I confess. Oh, Disneyland, Disneyland, the best disaster I ever planned. Though we're broke and slightly fried, we're the happiest family worldwide. Disneyland, Disneyland, where magic and mayhem go hand in hand.
The family came to Disneyland for magic, but got chaos, confusion, and one very angry grandpa. With stolen churros, spinning disasters, and absolutely no one staying calm, it somehow became the best trip ever.
Meet the Parker family. There's Mike. Dad, spreadsheet architect, self-proclaimed logistics genius, and a man who once reorganized his sock drawer by thickness and felt genuinely proud about it. There's Lisa, Mom, the emotional backbone of the entire operation and the only person in the family who could see exactly what was coming and had decided, with great love and wisdom, to simply let it happen. There are the twins, Ethan and Emma, both 11 years old. Ethan, the boy, was a walking, talking, churro-seeking chaos engine who thought everything in life was either hilarious or about to be. Emma, the girl, was organized, dry, and approximately 45 years old on the inside. Together, they were two halves of a very funny whole. And then there was Grandpa Roy, 71 years old, owner of a fanny pack he wore without a single trace of irony. No smartphone, referred to the internet as the computer web, had strong opinions about everything. Cars, card games, the proper height of a cup holder, and absolutely zero filter between his brain and his mouth.
He had also been deeply, genuinely, completely in love with his late wife Dorothy for 43 years, and he mentioned her constantly and without apology, which was the least funny thing about him and somehow also the funniest. Grandpa Roy was coming to Disneyland because last time he'd been left home alone, he'd gotten into what he described as a disagreement with the neighbor's cat that he was not prepared to face unsupervised. No one asked follow-up questions about the cat. These 5 people were about to take a vacation, and Mike had been planning it for 6 months. Music becomes slightly more dramatic, building gently like the opening of something grand. It started as most family disasters do, with a spreadsheet. Not just any spreadsheet, a spreadsheet with 47 tabs. He pointed to a hand-drawn map of Disneyland, drawn by hand with a ruler in considerable detail, and began walking the family through the plan. They would leave at 3:30 a.m. The flight was at 6. Mike had set 7 alarms. Lisa asked why 7. Mike said 7 was the number of a serious man. She looked at the laminated handout. She looked at the hand-drawn map. She looked at the laser pointer. She decided this was not the moment to say anything and made a note to herself to simply hold on. Grandpa Roy looked at his laminated handout and asked why it was shiny. Mike said durability, weather resistance, professionalism. Grandpa Roy said it was an itinerary for a vacation, not a naval operation. Mike said those weren't mutually exclusive. Then Grandpa Roy found tab 44. Tab 44 was titled Grandpa Contingencies. It had 17 subcategories. There was a long silence. Grandpa Roy said, slowly, carefully, with great dignity, "You made a whole tab for me." Mike confirmed that yes, he had. Grandpa Roy said Dorothy used to plan around him too. She called it accounting for Roy. Mike said that was essentially what the tab was. Grandpa Roy said Dorothy would have liked Mike. He said she also once told him Mike reminded her of a golden retriever who learned to use a calendar. But the point was, she meant it warmly. Ethan fell off the couch laughing. Emma, without looking up, said, "It's accurate." Mike clicked his laser pointer off. He clicked it back on. He pointed at the map and moved on. Music shifts, still playful but with a slight edge of controlled panic. The first alarm went off at 3:30 a.m. Mike was up, dressed, and downstairs making coffee before the second alarm sounded. He was, he thought, an absolute machine. Grandpa Roy was already in the kitchen. He had woken up at 3 a.m., decided that was close enough to his usual 4:30, made himself a full breakfast, and was now reading a newspaper he had brought from home. "Morning," he said cheerfully. "I made eggs." By 4:15 a.m., Mike had discovered that Ethan's suitcase was packed almost entirely with comic books and contained one pair of socks and no underwear. He had found Emma standing in the hallway with her bag perfectly organized, looking at Ethan's situation with the expression of someone who had predicted this outcome 3 days ago and was choosing with great restraint not to say so.
They left for the airport at 4:58 a.m., 28 minutes behind schedule. Mike said nothing. He said it entirely inside his own head, loudly and at length. But externally he smiled and loaded the car and told himself he had buffer time built in. He did not have buffer time built in. He invented the buffer time in the driveway as a coping mechanism. At airport security, Ethan set off the scanner with 4 Matchbox cars he had put in his jacket pocket because, as he explained, "They're small. I didn't think they'd count."
Grandpa Roy approached the body scanner, stopped and stared at it. He asked what it did. The TSA agent, a professional of considerable patience, explained it scanned for prohibited items. Grandpa Roy asked if it hurt. The agent said no. Grandpa Roy asked what happened if someone had a metal hip. The agent asked if he had a metal hip. Grandpa Roy said no, he was asking for informational purposes, for science. He then asked about a metal shoulder, a metal knee, whether the machine collected data, whether Dorothy would have approved of the machine. As the flight landed, Mike marched toward the rental car, his mind set on the adventure ahead. But when he arrived, the unexpected news hit like a brick. The company had lost his reservation. Their only option? A minivan. Still, there he was, gripping the steering wheel of a vehicle he deemed beneath him, driving in silence all the way to the hotel. In the back, Grandpa Roy discovered a hidden gem in this so-called undignified vehicle, a built-in cup holder perfectly fitted for his water bottle. With a grin, he claimed it was the most comfortable ride he'd ever had, even suggesting Mike should get one. Grandpa Roy chimed in about the outstanding legroom and how Dorothy would have loved it. But for Mike, a minivan was simply not an option.
The next morning, it poured. Not a gentle rain, but a downpour that drummed relentlessly against the ground, striking like a playful but fierce giant. Mike had consulted his weather contingency tab, which optimistically proclaimed, "Light rain. Proceed as planned with ponchos." He packed 5 ponchos, stowed safely in a waterproof bag, but they remained back in the hotel room. Mike offered to dash back and grab them, but Lisa objected, saying they were already so profoundly soaked that the ponchos were mere ideas rather than tangible gear. In that moment, Mike's gaze fell on Grandpa Roy. There he stood, sprightly in a bright orange rain poncho from 1987, boasting an impressive repair of electrical tape on the shoulder. He retrieved it from his fanny pack, embodying preparedness in a land of drenched chaos, and there, in the entrance of Disneyland, he was the only one ready for whatever the sky threw their way.
As the family approached the Radiator Springs Racers, they were greeted by a daunting 95-minute wait. Mike stared at the number, lost in thought, reflecting on their hectic morning. February, tab 1, early entry. They had missed it all, thanks to their flight and rental car struggles, which could have shaved their wait down to just 12 minutes. Yet, with a quiet stubbornness, Mike declared they would go ahead. Sometimes, the only way is forward. The line stretched ahead, and at the 25-minute mark, Grandpa Roy, ever prepared, pulled out playing cards from his fanny pack. From 3 people behind, he engaged with a young boy named Charlie, teaching him the game while charming everyone around him with tales about Dorothy. By the 35-minute mark, however, the excitement shifted. Little Ethan suddenly needed the bathroom, adding a twist to their wait. What a memorable day it was turning out to be.
The next morning began with optimism, which in the Parker family should always have been treated as a sign of impending disaster. Mike woke up with the energy of a man about to lead an expedition through uncharted wilderness, except the wilderness had churros and costumed rodents. At breakfast, he snapped open the park map and spread it across the table with such authority that for a moment he looked less like a father on vacation and more like someone preparing to invade a small but heavily defended nation. "Today," he announced, pointing at the map with great confidence, "we conquer the park." Carla, who had already highlighted routes, showtimes, meal breaks, and what she called high-risk whim zones, didn't even look up when she replied, "Today, we stick to the schedule." Grandpa Lou adjusted his orthopedic walking shoes with the solemn determination of a man preparing for a military campaign. "Today," he said, "I will not be humiliated by a kingdom run by a mouse." The children, meanwhile, had no interest in strategy unless strategy involved glitter, sugar, or public chaos. Ava wanted perfect photographs in front of the castle. Mia wanted souvenirs, preferably expensive ones that sparkled with unnecessary intensity. Ben wanted every snack sold in the park and would have happily begun his campaign at sunrise if left unsupervised. Naturally, the first collapse of civilization came before breakfast was even finished. Mike, for reasons no one fully understood, not even Mike, later, volunteered to carry everyone's trays back to the table. Carla told him not to, immediately and with the kind of clear, ominous tone that in any serious film would be followed by thunder. But Mike, puffed up with vacation confidence and several bad instincts, insisted he had it under control. He did not. He took one step successfully, which was enough to convince him he had been right. On the second step, one pancake shifted. Not dramatically at first, just a quiet little slide, like it had made a personal decision. Then the eggs followed with the soft inevitability of an avalanche. Then an entire cup of syrup lifted, tilted, and flipped directly into Mike's lap, with the sort of flawless trajectory usually reserved for guided missiles and divine punishment. There was a long, sacred silence. Mike stood motionless, drenched in syrup and scrambled eggs, still gripping the now empty tray with the stunned dignity of a man who had just lost a duel to breakfast. Ben leaned forward, stared at him for a moment, and whispered, "He smells like a haunted pancake." That was the end of all composure. Ava and Mia erupted into such violent laughter they nearly fell out of their chairs. Carla tried for approximately 2 seconds to remain sympathetic before collapsing into laughter herself, who had spent decades insisting it was impossible to laugh before coffee, produced a high, wheezing cackle so powerful it sounded medically significant. Mike looked down at himself, sticky and defeated. "I'm fine," he said, which was the sort of statement only a man wearing syrup pants could make with a straight face. By the time he had changed into emergency shorts and regained the last shreds of his self-respect, the family had moved on to the roller coaster. This was a major event because Ben had only recently reached the minimum height requirement, a fact he treated as if he had qualified for space travel. He checked himself against the height marker 3 separate times just to confirm his own greatness. "I'm ready," he announced. This was deeply untrue. The ride climbed, rattling upward with theatrical slowness, and Ben's expression changed with each second. At the bottom, he had looked triumphant. Halfway up, he looked uncertain. At the top, he looked like a child who had suddenly realized he had signed paperwork he did not understand. Then the coaster dropped. Ben screamed with a volume and purity rarely achieved outside emergency situations. It was not a normal scream. It was the scream of a soul leaving the body, filing a complaint, and attempting to return through the wrong exit. It was so loud that a woman in the next row turned around at the end and said, with complete sincerity, "I honestly thought that was part of the ride." Ben stumbled off the coaster, with his hair blown into shapes that had not previously existed, his knees unreliable, and his eyes carrying the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had briefly glimpsed the machinery of the universe. "I loved it," he said faintly, swaying where he stood. "I may never walk correctly again, but I loved it." As the day wore on, the family decided to attempt character photos, apparently forgetting who they were as people. On paper, the task seemed simple. Stand together, smile pleasantly, and preserve a magical family memory. In reality, they produced a series of images that looked like stills from a public unraveling. In every picture, Mia blinked with the dedication of a trained saboteur. Ava had one strand of hair stretched dramatically across her face in all of them, as if selected by a vengeful breeze. Ben made the same expression over and over again, one that suggested he was being slowly abducted by aliens, but was trying to remain polite about it. Mike lost his hat in the middle of one shot, and in another, Grandpa Lou wandered into the background while eating pretzel bites and staring suspiciously at a princess, as though he suspected political corruption. The true psychological trial, however, came when they entered the souvenir shop. No Karen ever truly walks into a souvenir shop. They drift into it under protest, drawn by air conditioning, false hope, and the scent of financial ruin. It was less a store than an emotional obstacle course, lined with sparkles, plastic, and carefully engineered childhood desire. Ava immediately selected a sparkly mouse-ear headband. Mia, spotting a slightly different sparkly mouse-ear headband, insisted it was superior and accused Ava of copying my whole aesthetic. Ava replied that Mia did not own the concept of sparkle. Mia argued that she absolutely did, and had in fact spiritually invented it. Ben, meanwhile, wanted everything, not one thing, not two things, everything. He wanted a toy lightsaber, a pirate hat, a plush dragon, a bubble wand, a foam sword, a keychain, a stuffed alien, and possibly the rights to the entire establishment. He moved through the store with the dazzled hunger of a tiny capitalist in training. Carla attempted to reason with everyone, which was noble but foolish. Mike tried making deals, which only led to Ben asking him, with heartbreaking sincerity, why he was against happiness. Grandpa Lou surveyed the scene for 12 seconds, located the nearest bench, sat down, and adopted the blank, spiritually detached expression of a man prepared to deny knowing any of them in a court of law. Eventually, after debates, near meltdowns, and one accidental strike to the shin from a demonstration wand, the family emerged with 2 headbands, 1 lightsaber, a suspicious amount of candy, and a duck-shaped coffee mug that Mike was still holding with visible confusion. "I don't remember buying this," he said. "No one remembers buying anything in there," Carla replied. By the time the sun began to set, they reached the castle for the fireworks in a state of total collapse. Ben was sticky again, though the source remained unknown and by mutual agreement, uninvestigated. Mia's headband sat crooked on her head like a glamorous injury. Ava had traded one of her shoes with Ben during something she described as a comfort emergency, leaving both of them walking in mismatched footwear like tiny survivors of a fashionable shipwreck. Mike's backpack zipper had burst and was now being held shut by pressure, prayer, and one emergency hair tie. Carla's carefully crafted schedule had been folded, crushed, and reduced to the historical value of an ancient ruin. Grandpa Lou, somehow, had fallen asleep on a bench. He sat there with his arms folded and his mouth slightly open. radiating the calm of a man who had simply chosen to leave reality for 20 minutes. Just before the fireworks began, he woke with a sudden snort, looked around in confusion, and asked, "Did I miss the uprising?" Then the sky exploded. Fireworks burst over the castle in impossible colors, enormous and dramatic and completely indifferent to human exhaustion. Music swelled through the air. Gold lit the towers. Red and blue shattered across the dark. The children froze, their faces tilted upward, mouths open in wonder. For one miraculous stretch of time, nobody argued, nobody complained, and nobody asked for food. Ben pointed at every burst of light as if he had personally approved each one. Ava and Mia forgot to compete with each other long enough to simply stare. Mike slipped an arm around Carla, and Carla, finally surrendering to the absurdity of the entire day, leaned against him and laughed the tired, helpless laugh of someone who knows the plan is dead and peace has come from accepting it. Beside them, Grandpa Lou stood with his hands in his pockets, the fireworks reflected in his eyes. "Well," he said softly, "for a trip where we lost a sock, a churro, one backpack zipper, our dignity, and at least one pancake to violence, I'd say this turned out pretty good." Carla looked at him. "Pretty good?" He nodded once. "Outstanding." The trip back to the hotel had the energy of a retreat from a very cheerful battlefield. Ben fell asleep leaning against Mike and had to be dragged and carried in shifting stages. Ava and Mia moved in a strange, slow, zombie-like shuffle children do when they have reached the absolute edge of consciousness but still refuse to admit defeat. Carla clutched the souvenir bags like a woman returning from war. And Grandpa Lou, powered entirely by stubbornness and ancient spite, marched ahead as if he could have done the whole day again. Back at the hotel, they collapsed onto the beds and began reliving the day in fragments. "The teacups nearly killed me," Mike said. "The seagull was organized," Grandpa Lou muttered. "That bird had intent." "You poured breakfast directly into your own pants," Ava reminded Mike. "You screamed louder than Ben on the roller coaster," Mia added. "I did not," Mike said, from the bed where he was already halfway asleep and tangled in a blanket like an abandoned burrito. Ben opened one eye. "You kind of did," he mumbled. Everyone laughed, and that, more than the castle or the rides or the fireworks, was what they would remember. Not the lines or the blisters or the syrup-soaked shorts or the stolen churro or the mystery stickiness. They would remember how every single disaster had somehow become the funniest part of the trip. Nothing had gone smoothly. Nothing had gone according to plan. In fact, the entire day had lurched from one ridiculous catastrophe to the next, and somehow, in exactly the way family vacations so often do, it had been absolutely perfect.